Urs von Balthasar was a Swiss Catholic theologian in the 20th century. One person referred to him at one point as one of the most, or I think the most cultured man in Europe. He was, because he was also an accomplished pianist. He was very, like, his earliest work was in this tradition called Germanistics, which is like German literature, history, and culture. And he wrote a 3-volume work on German literature and the theme of eschatology and apocalyptic in German literature. So he's well acquainted with German philosophy, but he's also well acquainted with the classics. He ends up writing 3 very influential works on patristic authors. He wrote on Origen. He wrote a famous book on Maximus Confessor called Cosmic Liturgy, and he also wrote a book on St. Gregory of Nyssa called Presence and Thought. But he wrote a ton of stuff. He wrote on saints. He's got a book on St. Therese. He's got a book on St. Thomas Aquinas. He wrote on themes. He's got a book on prayer. And none of that includes his very long trilogy, which is several volumes, almost like a Karl Barth's Church Dogmatics kind of thing. Very long, takes up a whole shelf. There's the Glory of the Lord, which is like 7 volumes. There's 3 Theodramas, like 5 volumes, and there's Theology, which is another 3 volumes. So he's one of these extremely prolific thinkers, Catholic thinkers of the 20th century, extremely influential. People still write dissertations on him and so on today. And there are Balthasar scholars out there. So Balthasar's position on universalism it's actually appropriate to, like, after that little bio to talk about that issue, because some of his last writings are on that issue. He wrote a book called Dare We Hope. I think that one was published around 1986 or so. So he's very well along. He's already written all this other stuff. It's only about, I don't know, not even 200 pages, perhaps 200. And then he gets a bunch of criticism from it about it. And so he writes a follow-up, much shorter version. And these two are usually bound together today, called A Short Discourse on Hell. That's like from 88 or 87 or 88. And so and there's a few other essays as well attached to that subject later on in his writings. And so that issue is sort of on his mind from really all the way to the end. And his basic position is this: it's what's called a hopeful universalist position, as opposed to, you might say, a confident universalist position. A confident universalist says God will save all. This would, in terms of the tradition, this would be held most likely by St. Gregory of Nyssa and Origen, and George MacDonald, I think, would certainly fit into that. Sergius Bulgakov, an Orthodox theologian, and currently David Bentley Hart. Those are some folks that would be a confident universalist. Balthasar is a hopeful universalist, and you notice the title of his book is Dare We Hope That All Men Shall Be Saved. And his fundamental point is this: we can and should, that's crucial, hope for the salvation of all, but we cannot know for certain that will be the final outcome. And so he wants to distinguish fairly sharply between hoping for something and knowing something. He says at one point, even he appeals to kind of like everyday language. He says, I hope that my friend will not, die from some terrible illness in the days to come, but do I therefore know that he will not? Implicitly what he's saying is, no, you don't. I mean, the whole point of you hoping for something is precisely because you don't know. So he wants to make a sharp distinction between hoping for something and knowing. If you hope for something, it's precisely because you don't know it for certain. And if you know something for certain, there wouldn't be a lot of sense in hoping for it. So I want to be as accurate as possible. His thesis, his position, isn't just that, hey, it's possible that everyone will be saved. He thinks that the weight of things, especially in the New Testament, is towards that everything will be saved. And this is where he gets criticized from both sides, because the more, you might say, traditionally infernalist crowd is super worried about Balthasar as a slippery slope into confident universalism, and like, somehow, if you get to a confident universalism, that will undermine the evangelical fervor to share the gospel with people, and it'll also maybe encourage moral and spiritual laxity. People won't go to church or something like that. All these charges have been brought against him. So the same charges that are brought against confident universalists, of course. So from one side, they're like, hold on a second. They notice rightly that Balthasar is not just saying it's, hey, it's possible. He says, like, for example, one point he says, one of the major shifts from the Old to New Testament isn't that there's divine judgment coming. The whole Bible says that. But in the New Testament, it's specifically the crucified and resurrected Lord who is the judge, right? You could go to like Acts chapter 10, Paul's speech to on the Areopagus, where he ends with that. The judge is the one who gave his very life. According, like, for Paul in Romans 5, while we were still sinners and hostile to God, he died for us. So the one who was willing to die for us, even while we were enemies, is the one who will be the judge. So mercy, if and where it can, will triumph over sheer justice. So Balthasar thinks the weight of things, and I think even at one point he says it's infinitely improbable that all won't be saved. So it's like a very hopeful, universalist position. So he gets criticized from one side, but then the confident universalist who gets criticized from the other side, because they will also rightly perceive that he still is holding out the possibility, however slim, that it won't happen that way. And so he says he just wants to be permitted to hope for the salvation of all. He thinks we should all do that. He notices, for example, that the Roman Latin Mass prays for the salvation of all, like teaches that we all pray for the salvation of all. It's in many different saints he goes over in the book and so on, where they're all praying for the salvation of all. Obviously, it's in the New Testament as well to do that. And it's the will of God, according to at least two passages in the New Testament, that all will be saved. So he thinks we should hope for it. He thinks that, so it's not just a sheer, maybe not. It's like probably, and you should really fervently pray for that, and we should really, with great hope, expect that. But you should never claim to know that. And that's where he sees a common link between, say, Origen's position and Augustine's position, even though in content they're diametrically opposed views. Augustine being a sort of the quintessential infernalist, who in the City of God, says, look, the eternity of the damned is just as eternal as the eternity of those in heaven. There's a kind of symmetry to it, even almost like an aesthetic sort of balancing. And then, of course, the doctrine of the Massa Damnata, most will go to hell. That's Augustine. And Origen's apokatastasis. Balthasar says, well, yeah, they're saying opposite things, but what they have in common is both seem to be sure about the end. And so he charges them both with presumption. They're presuming to know more than any human being could possibly know. And so that's kind of like his two arguments are, one, it's presumptuous to claim to know more than we can know. We cannot know the final outcome of all things. Two, because that's reserved for the just judge. There's one text where he says, we can hope for the salvation of all, but we are not permitted to peer behind the card, peer at the cards that the judge alone holds. You can't peer behind and see what he's going to do. And so it's the prerogative of the judge alone to make that final call. And then also Balthasar, he's famous for his dramatic approach to theology, which really emphasizes freedom. It emphasizes the freedom of the creature, of you and me, of any rational being, but also that first part was a sort of emphasizing the freedom of God to interact as he sees fit with his creation. And so God's freedom means he's the ultimate judge and the final word will be his. So you can't claim to know what he's going to say. And then our freedom means that there is this kind of, yes, perhaps dark possibility, but still you can't foreclose the possibility of a perpetual free resistance to God's will for the salvation of all, and so that kind of adds to the importance, in a certain, for some people at least, it adds to the importance or the weight of our decisions now. I'm sure we've heard before, somebody will say, well, look, if it's all going to turn out the same in the end, who cares what you do now? It sort of evacuates all of our actions of significance. I think that's a very thin and poor reading of universalism, and Balthasar knows better. He doesn't say that. But I do think he still wants to hold out a sort of a kind of a resistance to any abstract foreclosure or prediction about how the end will happen. And that's sort of a part of what it means to be free, is that you're not entirely sure, even though you think the weight is going towards one, say in his case, the salvation of all. Like, it's inconceivable to Balthasar how any rational creature will ultimately hold out against the love and patience and mercy of God and the beauty of God. But he still, for all that, is not going to say, therefore I know it will in fact be for every rational creature that they will eventually yield to God's mercy and saving will. So that's Balthasar in a nutshell. The hopeful universalist is one that is highly hopeful, weighted towards the mercy of God, triumphing over all rebellious wills, but still unwilling to pronounce an absolute yes, that is what's going to happen.